Brad Schimmel is the Republican candidate for Attorney General in Wisconsin, and he slipped up and let people know what he actually thinks of minimum wage workers. He said, quote, "I want every one of our neighbors to have a job again, a well-paid job, so we don't have to argue about minimum wage for someone working at Burger King. Let's get them a real job." Yeah. See, the thing, Chris Christie, before I continue, let me just say, Chris Christie also made a very, very similar comment either yesterday or today as well, where he's like, "I'm tired of talking about the minimum wage." But the thing that's so interesting about this comment and why I wanted to discuss it is that as he thinks he's being reasonable and open-minded and kind, he's doing the exact opposite thing. He's like, well, I want everybody to be employed, so let's not talk about fast food jobs. Let's talk about real jobs. And this, to me, is one of the defining differences between Democratic politicians and Republican politicians. Now, you guys know I have deep, significant problems with the entire system and the way it functions, but call everything for what it is. There's one side of the debate, I use that term very loosely, that they're just clowns, and the other side is somewhat human, where they understand and they realize what people go through when they work low-wage jobs. I mean, it's this one fallacy that they always come back to, the conservatives, when talking about the minimum wage. They act like it's the experience for everybody, and it should be, or it can be, the experience for everybody, where a minimum wage job, it's just a stepping stone. Just when you're a teenager, you go and you do this thing, you get paid a little bit of money, and then eventually you suck up to your boss and you move on to your next job and you work your way up the ranks, and next thing you know, you're the CEO of a company. But what they don't understand is that oftentimes that only works for already privileged white men. Okay, it's much harder, much harder for women to work their way up that ladder, for minorities to work their way up that ladder, even for white men who aren't already privileged and don't have connections and don't navigate their way through the system using nepotism. And also, if everybody woke up tomorrow and they busted their ass as much as possible at their job, and they sucked up, and they tried their best to rise their way up the ranks and become the CEO of the company, or become the vice president, or what have you, it wouldn't happen. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. Why? Because not everybody could be the vice president. Not everybody could be the owner or the boss. That's not the way reality works. So it's a fact that we're always going to have people working minimum wage jobs, and we're always going to need people working minimum wage jobs. So then the question becomes, how do we as a society and how does the economy treat those people? How do we treat them? And all that progressives are asking for, all we've been asking for from day one, we don't want a totally Marxist/communist system where it's from each according to his ability, to each according to his need, and you divvy up everything equally, sharing is caring. No! All we're asking for is that the minimum wage workers make a living wage. We just want them to make enough money to be able to pay the bills, to be able to keep the lights on and feed their kids and do that. Is that really unreasonable to ask for that? And look, they're going to get that money either way. It's just a matter of, will they run to the government because they need to, and then the taxpayers subsidize them through Medicaid and through food stamps and through other social safety net programs? Or are we going to force the companies to stop being welfare queens and to make them pay their fair share? And understand that it's not like we're asking for the companies to pay these people more than they're worth, because that's what the counter-argument is. Conservatives say, oh, well, you just want to give these people a handout. Wrong! If you look at the data, the amount of productivity that goes into one of those workers, it's over $20 an hour. They're producing over $20 an hour worth of goods and services, and they're only getting $7.25 in return. And then you have idiots like Brad Schimmel out there, you know, being totally nonchalant and casual in his condescending dismissal of some of the hardest working people in the country. When he says, oh, let's not talk about Burger King jobs. Let's talk about people getting real jobs. I can't take it. They're so, you know what it is? They're so myopic and they're so narcissistic and they're so selfish. They can only see things through their own perspective and their own eyes, and they're flat out incapable of just trying to see the world through somebody else's position and trying to understand that we live in a system, every country in the world has a system like this, where we're always going to need people to do those minimum wage jobs, so you have to pay them enough to survive. Again, if he doesn't think this is reasonable, if the right-wingers don't think it's reasonable, well, that's why I mock you, and that's why I dismiss you, and that's why I don't even think it's worth it to have a conversation with people like this. I'd rather do a segment like this where I tell you, I quote you verbatim, and then I rip it apart, because I'm not interested in what your response to this is, because there is no even half-decent response to this. I mean, somebody said to me the other day, I've gotten this in the past few days, a few people, and by the way, I'm not blaming these people who said it to me on Twitter. I love everybody who listens to the show. But one person said, I think tried to invite Glenn Beck on my show, and then another person said, I should go debate Rush Limbaugh. And in both cases, I immediately responded and said, I would never in a million years let those fucking lunatics on my airwaves, because there's not a real discussion going on. There's not a real discussion. On the one hand, you have somebody who doesn't know anything about economics, doesn't know anything about politics, doesn't know anything about the reality that working people face. They're callous, they're abrasive, they're ignorant, they're moronic, and oftentimes they're liars, and I'm supposed to sit here and have a conversation with those people as if it's a legitimate back and forth? No! That's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. I mean, that's like saying go sit down and have a conversation about morality with Charles Manson. I'm not interested in his position on morality because he's overwhelmingly incorrect. I'll listen to it to then mock it. I'm not going to listen to it and say, interesting point. Let me weigh that into consideration. No way. I mean, would a neuroscientist sit down and have a conversation and have a discussion with a kindergartner and say, what's your opinion on the nature of consciousness and the roots of it? That wouldn't happen. That wouldn't happen because there aren't two legitimate sides to the discussion. By the same token, when it comes to this issue of the minimum wage, and when it comes to, honestly, the overwhelming majority of the shit Glenn Beck talks about or Rush Limbaugh talks about, they're just partisan hacks who don't know their ass from their elbow, and they're begging to be taken seriously. Well, sorry, I don't take them seriously, and I don't take Brad Schimmel seriously for making these disparaging comments about minimum wage workers.